One of the coolest technologies that's making its return, yes return, this gaming generation is the 3D audio technology in the PlayStation 5, which we've only heard about only once back in Mark Cerny's presentation in March, where the content was overly technical because it was directed at game developers rather than gamers. And I never felt that this technology received the attention and coverage it truly deserves. So in this video, we're going to analyze and explain the real impact of the 3D audio technology in the PlayStation 5 using fun, simplified examples.
Audio design in video games, and especially 3D audio, is a complex and deep topic, and I wanted to give this very interesting topic the sufficient time it deserves, so that I could provide to you a high-quality analysis and explanation. Therefore, and to avoid having a single long video, this series is going to be split into two parts. In part 1, we will analyze and explain the general audio design in games and the limitations of current audio solutions, using fun, simplified, practical examples. And finally, in part 2, we will analyze and explain how Sony created and captured the 3D audio for the PlayStation 5 and how the 3D audio in the PS5 has the potential to completely transform the audio experience for gamers, using also fun, simplified, practical examples. Oh, and I would also recommend you use your favorite headset when watching these videos to maximize your experience. First, we need to analyze and understand how sound travels to our ears. Different objects produce different sounds at various frequencies, and the human ear can typically hear audio frequencies in the range of 20 Hz to 20 kHz. The sound waves travel from a sound source in direct paths to each right and left ear, and also in indirect paths, reflecting and bouncing off objects around us and even off our body parts before reaching our ears. And each time the sound wave bounces off an object or our body, its audio frequency is altered slightly, creating a complex echo that carries information about the physical space around us. This is also known as reverb. As sound hits the body, the shape and the size of the structural features of our head, which contains the ears, and even our upper body parts all play a part in altering the shape of the audio frequencies. But the main factors are the head and the ear. Even as it enters the ear, the sound waves continue to bump and reflect off the outer ear's bumps and humps, further altering the frequency shape as well before it enters our inner ear canal. As a result, the sound waves arrive at slightly different time intervals to each ear, from both the direct and the indirect paths, from the reflecting and bouncing off the stuff around us, and it even arrives at slightly different volume to each ear. The brain processes all this audio information to ultimately identify what the sound is, which direction is it coming from, and even its estimated distance. The result is our ability to build a complex 3D spatial audio understanding around us to be able to identify the location of the sound almost precisely. The relation of how the ear receives and translates the sound from a sound source, which as we saw is affected by several parameters, is what is called as the head-related transfer function, as you might have guessed, because of the big role that the shape and the size of the head, which again contains the ears, play in this process. And this is what Mark Cerny kept referring to multiple times during his 3D audio presentation for the PlayStation 5 due to the importance of the HRTF.
Scientifically speaking, each one of us has their own HRTF data that is built depending on the size and shape of the head and the ear and even the body parts. You can consider HRTF as your own custom audio filter that filters audio in a way that only you can understand. A lot of our directional sense ability is built on experience as we grow up, from the time we were children. Over time, as we are absorbing both visual and audio information around us, the brain builds an association between what we see and what we hear, the objects that we are seeing from different locations around us, and the different audio frequencies that our ears are absorbing, and the different volumes of each object, and so on. Ultimately, the result is the ability of the brain to build a pool of audio references of all these different objects at different positions, different sounds, and so on. It's an incredibly complex process that takes years for the brain to build. So for example, we notice that the sound for objects that are in front of us sound louder than objects that are behind us, and so on. And this is one of the primary reasons why, even with our eyes closed, we can still tell the location of the audio objects around us to a decent accuracy.
As a matter of fact, our human ears and brains are so sophisticated and so advanced that we are able to simultaneously process all this audio data for different objects, different sounds from different locations at different volumes to be able to identify the sound, the location of the sound, where it's coming from, and so on through all this complex process. To ultimately, again, build a 3D spatial audio understanding around us that is built on both experience and the capability of our brains and ears. This complex process occurs in a few milliseconds only. Comparatively, translating visual data is much easier and faster, and this is one of the primary reasons why game developers might focus more on graphics than audio design, because it's easier to impress gamers using graphics, higher resolution like 4K or higher frame rate, maybe even more beautiful art style. But creating a convincing audio experience is something a little bit more difficult to do. And the brain is very smart at processing complex audio in real life that we have to work extra hard to convince it that an artificial sound from a game is real. Reproducing sound realistically is a very difficult and complex task. Let's consider the following scene from Ghost of Tsushima, a PS4 game that is rich with ambient sound cues to the player. And in this scene, we can see the game's protagonist, Jin Sakai, riding his horse with wind leaves blowing to his left side, and that pesky golden bird that always distracts you in the game flying to his rear left. Additionally, raindrops are falling all around him, on his head, on his horse, and on the ground around him. Therefore, the main sound sources in this scene are the raindrops, the blowing leaves in the wind, and the flying bird.
Now, admittedly, I was in a bit of a rush when I was making this part of the video, so I just took one of the marketing screenshots of the game online and I photoshopped the other elements on top of it. So, bear with me, imagine that this is an actually captured scene from the game, as it would be anyway. Trust me, I'm doing this for a very good reason. Now, if this scene was in real life, then the raindrops and the leaves would be multi-object, meaning that each one of them is an individual raindrop or an individual leaf that is falling or flying in the wind around us at different angles, and each one of them would have their own unique sound signature or sound fingerprint due to the complex way that audio travels, as we saw earlier. And we would be able to differentiate the audio signature, the different raindrops that are falling on our head from the raindrops falling on the horse or on the floor around us. Likewise, we would be able to differentiate to a high extent the leaves that are flying in our face from the leaves flying to our left side or behind us. Each one of them would have a unique different sound signature. And finally, the bird is a single object. It's a single bird that is flying behind us on the rear left, and we would be able to tell not only its general direction, but also to a high extent the actual location of the bird behind us. But audio in a video game is done differently. Generally speaking, the game audio is usually just a single flat audio file per object. So for example here, a single flat audio file for the raindrops, for the leaves, and for the bird. And the game developers use several software and audio tricks to simulate different audio effects. For example, a single flat rain audio file is used for the rain, but if the player goes inside a house or a cave, then an audio filter is applied to the same file to create and simulate dampened rain effect. Of course, this is just generally speaking. In some games where audio might have a higher priority as part of the game design, developers might capture multiple audio files for a single object. Likewise, multiple filters could be applied to an audio file to create a new sound effect. The distance of an object is simulated by manipulating the output audio level for that object. If this object moves closer to the player, then the audio is increased for that object. And if that object moves further away from the player, then the audio level for that particular object is decreased to simulate distance. Additionally, if objects are behind the player, they would sound lower with an audio filter to make them sound a little bit dull than the objects that are in front of the player.
leveraging what we discussed earlier, how the brain builds experience over time, an association between what you see and what you hear, and for the objects in front of you and behind you. And while this process works well enough and has been working well enough for many years now, in the real life, something like the sound of a gunshot fired from near you or from far away do not sound the same, with only the difference being the volume level lower or higher. No, due to the complex process of audio traveling to our ears, as we saw at the beginning of this video, the audio signature for each gunshot would be completely different in real life. Furthermore, game developers mix the different audio files for different objects to create what we call the game mix, and audio is placed on per channel or per speaker basis, depending on the sound system used, like a TV or stereo sound system, headphones, or a surround system. And the idea here is to place each sound object in that particular scene to the closest matching speaker in the sound system. Generally speaking, the more channels or speakers you have in your sound system, the more accurate the sound representation is. Nevertheless, it's a basic channel-based placement to indicate the direction of a sound rather than the actual placement of the sound object position in the world. Therefore, in this particular scene, the raindrops audio file is played on all the available channels in the sound system to simulate the rain falling all around us, while the leaves that are flying or blowing in the wind would play on the left available channels to simulate the leaves blowing to the left side of the player. And finally, the audio file for the bird would play on the closest matching rear left channel in the corresponding sound system if it exists. If not, then it just plays on the left channel. But every sound system, even the best ones, have their own limitations. Let's take a closer look. For example, a TV or a two-channel stereo sound system outputs the same sound waves on both channels, left and right, meaning that the same source sound waves for a single sound source arrive to both ears twice. This results in an undesirable interference known as crosstalk that immediately breaks the immersion for the brain, since both ears are hearing the same sound essentially twice. Because in the real life, you would hear the audio from a single source only once but to both ears, and not twice to both ears. Now, channel-based placement for audio objects here, such as the leaves and the birds playing on the left channel, can help in mitigating this effect and creating a more accurate sound experience. However, you are ultimately still limited by only two front audio channels, left and right, and audio cannot be reproduced in an immersive manner all around the player, such as from the sides or even below and above the player. You are left with plenty of audio gaps in this audio solution. And last but not least, you also need to maintain the audio sweet spot, and if you move outside of this sweet spot, you lose audio direction and lose further immersion. Long story short, in this sound solution, the brain cannot be properly immersed into the experience, and you cannot be tricked into thinking that these sounds are realistic or coming from the real world. Now, there has been some advancements in crosstalk cancellation, some advanced stereo sound systems and soundbars, but let's not dig into that since the vast majority of the systems available today don't have this implementation, yet at least. Switching to headphones immediately resolves the crosstalk issue, since you are essentially placing a single channel on each ear, left and right. But since the same audio is played to both ears, left and right, and at the same volume, it makes it feel like the sound is coming from inside your head rather than the sound coming from all around you the way it should be. And this is one of the primary reasons why gamers might prefer to use headphones while gaming as opposed to TV speakers or even a decent surround system, because they feel that headphones provide a more intimate or a more engulfing audio experience, even though technically speaking, it's not necessarily a more accurate audio experience. This also introduces another set of problems. So with channel-based placement of sound objects in this scenario, for example, the leaves and the bird playing on the left channel means that only the left ear would be able to hear these sounds coming from the left channel, while the right ear would not be able to hear anything, and this breaks the immersion for the brain immediately. Because in the real life, even if we hear an audio source from one side only, both ears would still hear the same audio but at slightly different time intervals. And while headphones can give a nice experience, a more intimate gaming experience, it's not necessarily the most accurate sound experience, and there are plenty of audio gaps in this sound solution. And while headphones do not suffer from the sweet spot issue of stereo sound systems, it does have its own set of problems in the form that if
you move or twist your head around, the sound fields also twist and move around with your head, which is again unrealistic, and the brain immediately detects this and the immersion is broken. Because once again, in real life, the audio objects do not move around with you when you twist your head around. Now, some gaming headphones provide a feature, between quotations, of creating a virtual surround sound experience, but all it really does is just expand the audio field and apply some audio trickery to simulate the effect. Almost always, the effect is very artificial and unconvincing, and it's very rare to come across a convincing virtual audio experience. I generally just leave them off. Switching to a surround sound system such as 5.1, 7.1, 9.1 and so on immediately elevates the audio experience and creates a much better audio experience by providing additional speaker channels around the player, meaning that audio can be reproduced more accurately and in a more immersive manner, kind of a 360-degree kind of coverage. Although saying 360 is kind of misleading because it's 360 horizontally with very limited vertical coverage above and below the player. Additionally, you still need to maintain the sweet spot like a stereo or a sound system, and not all gamers are willing to spend this much money or perhaps don't even have the physical space for such a solution. Nevertheless, it's a vastly improved audio experience over something like a stereo, TV speakers, or even headphones, with far less audio gaps in this solution, although you are still limited in audio coverage vertically above and below the player, and to some small extent in between the speakers themselves. And what's interesting here is that if you're playing the game and an object, say the bird, flies higher on the screen, even though the audio would still be coming from the same audio channel from the same direction, the brain concludes that the bird has actually flown higher in the game. But what's very important to understand here is that this conclusion of the brain is built from its experience of linking visual and audio data over the years, as we saw at the beginning of the video, and it's not based on the accuracy and immersion of the audio experience from the game as it should be. And the simplest example you could try is close your eyes while playing the game and try to build a spatial 3D audio understanding around you to identify not only the direction but also the location of each audio object. Using audio only, more likely than not, you won't be able to identify the location of each audio object as you would in real life with your eyes closed, due to the technical limitations of audio design in games and also the limitations of the used audio system. And this is where technologies such as Dolby Atmos can play a big role in creating a more complete spherical 360 audio experience by installing additional multiple ceiling speakers, 2, 4, 6 or even more, or at least installing speakers that are pointing toward the ceiling. This gives the sound system far more accurate and realistic vertical coverage of audio fields, and even diagonally, thereby creating a more realistic 3D audio experience for the gamer. Basically, we're just adding vertical speakers to the existing horizontal speakers. This further elevates the experience of surround sound systems, and audio gaps are almost completely eliminated. This of course depends on the audio implementation in the game. The game needs to support Dolby Atmos and have a good implementation for it, which is sometimes rare to see these days. However, and as you can see, this technology requires an even more expensive and more complex sound system than your typical surround sound system, which most gamers don't have or are not willing to spend this much money for it. It's a little bit complex, it's expensive, requires big space, and you still also need to take care of room acoustics. And technically speaking, you are still limited by the number of vertical speakers you are installing. And if you want to be picky, you also need to maintain the sweet spot for the optimum audio experience. It's worth noting that some soundbars have the ability to recreate Dolby Atmos by using multiple speakers that are aligned in a specific way inside the soundbar and applying some audio trickery to provide a fairly convincing Dolby Atmos experience. But it's very rare to come across a good soundbar that can give you a convincing Dolby Atmos experience. And if you do find one, it's usually very expensive, and ultimately you cannot create exactly the same accurate Dolby Atmos experience. So in conclusion, each of these popular audio solutions today can give you the presence inside the game, but not the locality, at least not to the level that it should be. And this is where Sony's 3D audio technology promises to bring a much more immersive and realistic audio experience, to the point where you can identify audio location of objects exactly where they are, and even go as far as identifying individual water drops falling around your head. What are Sony's plans to provide the 3D audio technology in the PlayStation 5, and how can 3D audio transform the existing audio experience? This is what we're going to analyze in the second and final part of this video, which I will upload to the channel very soon, so make sure you are subscribed. Leave a like if you like this video in any way, and maybe share the video with your friends. Help me in spreading this channel, and I'll see you next time, inshallah.